Vinland Saga is the best historical action story adapted into an anime. Which we know to be true because after 24 episodes released throughout 2019, the story hasn't even freaking started yet and it was already placed on people's best of year lists. Including mine. What do you mean the story hasn't started? I mean, literally, the anime covers the first 54 chapters of the original manga, the last of which is literally called End of the Prologue. This is a series that you need to strap yourself in for because, well, most large-scale narratives finish off after like 24 episodes or so. Vinland is just getting started. Hell, despite being called Vinland Saga, the actual location of Vinland is only mentioned in the first initial episodes and then forgotten about until it's brought up again near the end because of my main man, Leif Erikson, which, if you didn't pick up on because of Leif's name and the fact that I started by saying that this series is a historical action anime, then there's me shining a spotlight on all of that for you. This series is loosely based on real historical events that took place shortly after 1000 AD, including characters whose fates you can actually look up on Wikipedia, so spoilers if you do that. But unlike your traditional history class where you have to memorize names and dates because that's all our broken education systems like to focus on as far as history is concerned, this series, Vinland Saga, takes that history and turns it into an epic adventure worthy of the name. It is a story about kings, about pillaging and Vikings, about revenge, and about love. This is a story where there are no heroes and villains, just goals, ambitions, and the will to achieve them. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Arcada, and today on Glass Reflection, the 2019 anime from Wit Studio, Vinland Saga. But first, as we have been doing all week, we at Glass Reflection would like to give a shout out to the sponsor of not just this video, but for the whole review week of awesome, Surfshark VPN. A VPN, for those who somehow don't know, a VPN is a way for you to protect your privacy and what you view online as you surf the web. Not only does it secure your data to stop people, like those from your ISP, from being able to see where you are connecting from, but you can also use it to change your digital location to that of another country to bypass pesky region locking. Content blocked on services such as Netflix and YouTube can be made accessible simply by connecting to a local server from the country that you'd like to access. If you haven't figured it out yet, by the end of this video, I'm going to be telling you to go watch Vinland Saga. This is something that will happen, which means that you need access to the streaming service where it is available. And out of all of the places where you can watch anime, Vinland Saga is only available on Amazon Prime Video, which thankfully you can use Surfshark to access. So why don't you give it a try? If you don't like it, within 30 days, let them know, and they'll get you your money back. There will be a link and a promo code in the description where you can sign up for a percentage off, as well as an extra 3 months free, because we like you guys so much. Thank you very much to Surfshark for sponsoring. Now, back to Vinland Saga. Let's jam. You may be confused as to why a show called Vinland Saga has virtually nothing to do with any historical location known as Vinland. It's actually not all that confusing at all when, historically, if you're talking about Vikings and sagas, two historical texts come to mind. The Saga of the Greenlanders and Eric the Red's saga. Whoa, 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 whoa. Don't do that. I'm not going to drop a history lesson on you. I'm just giving you important context. Hold up. Don't walk away yet. In short, Greenlanders covers the several tales of various expeditions to what is now North America, and more specifically, Canada. These includes the expeditions of Eric the Red, his son Leif, and a man known as Thorfinn. The saga of Eric the Red, despite its namesake, focuses far more on the expedition of Thorfinn and his family. An expedition that, as of the telling of this anime, hasn't happened yet. And this is why I said that Vinland Saga is loosely based on historical events. Even if you take both Viking sagas as gospel, which, don't do that. They conflict with one another enough as it is, and who knows if it even actually happened. Even if you took them super seriously, Thorfinn doesn't appear until close to the launching of his own expedition to Vinland. No connection with the Danes or descendants of Romans, and definitely no relation to any kind of royalty regardless of country. That Vinland Saga goes out of its way to toss this character, Thorfinn, into locales that he has no business being in historically means that you probably don't want to be using this anime to learn about real history. Though, the portrayals of individual characters do seem to be somewhat in line with what we know about them. But what this does mean is that since history is, from an entertainment perspective, usually boring, Vinland Saga takes the noteworthy events from history and makes them more fun to watch by just tossing historical accuracy out the window in favor of whatever balls-to-the-wall action set piece they can come up with. This is also known as the fate route. Speaking of fate, you know what would make the rise of King Canute the Great even more entertaining? Besides, me actually getting his name right? Pulling some speculative history about the inspiration of King Arthur, having massive ties to Roman military, and then making that a fact in your universe to give us one of the most badass commanders in the entire show. And somehow I am not talking about the show's protagonist. Why is that? Well, because like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the real protagonists are the characters that we make up along the way. Vinland Saga starts us off with a Viking warrior named Thors, or Thors. Depending on how you want to pronounce the TH, I'll probably screw it up. This was a man who left to live in Iceland with his wife and children to escape the constant war of the Danish kings. He didn't move far enough away, though, as he was eventually drafted once again by the Vikings, specifically a Viking named Floki. Then, en route back across the ocean, Floki hires a group of mercenaries, commanded by one Askeladd, to murder Thors, since he's more trouble than he's worth. And despite Thors' fighting prowess, he dies defending his son, Thorfinn. Time skip! And the rest of the series follows Thorfinn, who has now grown up alongside Askeladd and his crew, specifically with the intent of learning to fight and one day killing Askeladd in retaliation for the death of his father. Thorfinn as a character is really hard to watch, at least in these early parts of the story, as his character has very little depth to him, beyond like his quest for vengeance and all of his short-term goals to once again face Askeladd in a duel, only to lose. One of the downsides of having a story of this length is that a character arc such as Thorfinn's takes so long to develop that in 24 episodes, it feels like it's barely moved at all. Much of his development comes as a contrast between his newfound life of revenge and what is shown about his father. Thors was a warrior with almost no equal on the battlefield, who nonetheless found no joy in a life of fighting. He was a man who came to believe that a true warrior needed no weapon, and that fighting was not something to be sought out. This is a mindset quite counter to the bloodlust shown by his son. Largely, Thorfinn is just seriously naive throughout the story, taking orders from Askeladd only for the reward of a duel. And Askeladd takes full advantage of this, sending Thorfinn out on a series of impossible challenges, of which there is no downside to him, and plenty of massive upsides should Thorfinn succeed. Despite being the closest thing the story has to an antagonist in the early episodes, Askeladd, though, ends up being far more like the protagonist by the end of the prologue than Thorfinn could have even hoped for. While the little Viking boy is jumping around, spitting with his twin daggers at men 3 times his size while screaming about revenge, Askeladd is big-braining entire countries in an attempt to achieve his own goals. The reason why you watch this series, this prologue, is not for Thorfinn's quest of revenge, which will most likely come into play later on, but you watch it for Askeladd, his conniving, his scheming, and his actions that take him from a lowly mercenary to the vassal of a prince in line for the throne of Denmark, and also through his actions, the throne of England. Much of the writing in this series is, in short, a masterwork, one which I have actually been a fan of for over a decade now. The manga for the series was written by Makoto Yukimura, and if you don't know of his work, I highly encourage you to go and check out the hard sci-fi anime awesomeness that is Planetes at your earliest convenience. That was a story where Yukimura took an idea about space janitors and turned it into a brilliant tale about humanity out in the vast reaches of space. But Yukimura is very good at character drama and melding the setting and key events around that, bringing out the best in his characters. They didn't just use historical events to drive the narrative here in Vinland Saga, but also instead analyzes plenty of introspective type philosophical themes through character motivations and development, which fully grounds this world, even if at times some of the characters feel simplistic. The Viking warrior Thorkel is a good example of this. Introduced as an antagonist and the man defending London from siege, Thorkel's motivations are some of the most simple. He is a man that loves fighting and takes to becoming a turncoat, swapping from the side of the Vikings to that of the defending English, purely because that would be more fun. He enjoys the challenge of fighting battles where the result was not already predetermined by numbers beforehand, only to get deeply depressed when the Danish armies alter their plans to avoid conflict with him. Thorkel is also a man that wants to become more than what his simplistic goals drive him to. He's deeply inspired by his nephew Thor's ideals about being a perfect warrior, but he has no idea what that truly means. So he hopes to find some answers by continually battling Thor's son, Thorfinn. Then, of course, we have Canute, introduced as a timid prince, one who doesn't do much acting and speaks even less. Coddled by his retainer into being a child who cannot defend himself with either the sword or his wit. But by the end of the prologue, Canute has massive changes through influenced by both Askeladd and the drunken priest, Father Willibad. From Askeladd, he takes the voice of a leader. From Willibad, the idea about the meaning of love. And love, is an interesting discussion in terms of what it means in Vinland Saga. Willibad's goal, for example, as a secondary character, seems to be to find a kind of love that is hard for him to truly explain to any of the characters who ask him about it. He's not looking for a family love or relationships of lust, but something far deeper and more personal. In discussions with the young prince, the prince gets his ideas challenged, making him question the teachings of God that he has grown up with, making him more resolute in not only becoming a ruler, but also trying to turn that which he rules over into a paradise better than what the Lord promises beyond death. This is what I mean about the depths of characters in this story. Like, most anime of this length barely scrape by with one or two fully developed characters by the end of their 24-episode run, but Vinland Saga has a small handful of what can be described as protagonists, and even a larger slew of secondary characters with their own goals, achievements, and developments. When I first made a video about Vinland Saga back when it started, one of my biggest points is that the series is a slow burn, and I said that positively. The narrative and the direction of the episodes really takes its time in fleshing out both the world and those that live in it. But when you look back, you start to realize just how much information and story actually got told to you in what was a really short amount of time. While the manga is perfectly placed as it is, the team at Wit Studio stuck to that, laying out just enough so that every new episode had plenty of things to offer, while never feeling either rushed or, conversely, feeling like we were just padding time to make the episode count line up with the end of the narrative arc. This all adds to the growing pile of reasons why Wit Studio is slowly becoming one of my favorites in the industry. Between the action-heavy nature of Titan, to the jazzy drama of Great Pretender, to now both the subtle narratives present in Magus Bride and Vinland, they can handle quite a bit, all the while bringing on talent that hasn't yet made a name for themselves. Like a few videos back, when we were talking about Magus Bride, I mentioned how, for that project, the director had spent very little time in the director's chair before actually being brought in. And here, the exact same is true. While director Yabuta has spent plenty of time directing 3D animation and a variety of projects, he only had one other series to his name prior to this, the cult series Inuyashiki from 2017. And that's it. But like with Wit's previous projects, Yabuta knocked it out of the park. Easily. Of course, that's just me talking about the directing. It says nothing specifically about the quality of the action that this series has to offer, which it provides in spades. I really shouldn't be all that surprised, though. Attack on Titan has such notoriety with its great action that the idea that Vinland would have horrible action is almost an impossibly absurd notion. The battles here, from the simple one-on-one duels to the larger scale fights, are great, bringing in just enough needed adrenaline before the story starts to dive back more into the levels of intrigue and character-driven greatness that the story should become well known for. Do you ever just finish a series and you want to scream at your screen, yes, this is it. This is what I watch anime for. Not too long ago, that was me after I watched the film for Made in Abyss. It was a roller coaster of a film that elicited such a reaction that I could not even attempt to capture on camera what my thoughts really were, even though I filmed it shortly after watching it. Vinland Saga is not a series that made me cry tears of joy, or one that made me scream at my screen about how much I loved it. My reaction to Vinland Saga was much more reserved, but nonetheless impactful. It's a series where I ended it, and I leaned back in my chair, and I thought to myself, damn. This better not be the freaking end. We are not even a third of the way through the existing manga, and already Vinland Saga has landed itself squarely in my list as some of the best anime that I have had the pleasure of watching. Originally, I thought that my love for it was going to be because of its ties to my home country of Canada, as Vinland, while its exact location is up for debate depending on who you ask and whose tales you follow, it's either in Newfoundland, where my family's from, or it's just further down in New Brunswick. The show's second opening says New Brunswick, but you know, as I said, such a thing is historically arguable. But my love for this series has grown beyond my humble expectations for it into something that even I could not have predicted that I would enjoy to this degree. Vinland Saga, as its name implies, is a saga, a long historical story of heroic achievement. But the idea of what is a hero, what becoming a hero entails, is core to its initial narrative, and it's what drove my interest in this world and these characters to new heights. I had a couple other pages here written about the show, admittedly in point form, about what I loved about this series, but I've decided against adding them to this video, not because I don't think that they are relevant, but because no explanation that I think I could give for them would be worthy of the content I talk about. I cannot, in a few quick paragraphs, fully detail Knut's story, or even the importance of characters like Bjorn or the King. For me to do any of that justice would take an almost equivalent amount of time for you to just go and watch the show. So if you watch anything over the next couple of months, well, I just spent a whole week showcasing some absolutely stellar shows that you might love even more so than Vinland Saga, depending on your tastes. But if you asked me what to watch, if you only had time for one out of all of the shows that I have discussed this week, this would be it. Vinland Saga contains almost everything I want out of a more mature story, one unafraid of talking about death, one that both romanticizes violence while offering a conversation about something more aligned with pacifist ideals. While other shows, other narratives are great entertainment, things that I would recommend to pass the time or enjoy for a variety of reasons, Vinland Saga is more than just great entertainment. It is a beacon of great storytelling wrapped in an adaptation that raises the bar for what adaptations can do with their material. Vinland Saga is a seriously great series. If you haven't watched it yet, you absolutely should. So, surprise, surprise, what do you think I'm going to be recommending as far as this show goes? Try to guess. Can you do it? Can you? Can you? Certified Frosty. Of freaking course it's Certified Frosty. A rating for only the best of the best, or those shows too important to ignore. For freaking prologue! My god! Yeah. So it's pretty good, I guess. For alternate anime recommendations, I mean, Berserk? It's hard because there are very few things that give off the same feeling as this. Even something like Berserk leans a bit further into the realm of fantasy than Vinland does, and everything else, like say The Legend of Arslan, is okay, but just doesn't have that same oomph that makes Vinland so freaking good. So yeah, I guess after Vinland Saga, go watch Berserk. The original, of course, not the films or anything like that. You'll thank me later. And lastly, a very special thank you to my patrons who not only support my work in general, but also allow me to do what I do. I love and appreciate you all. Specifically, though, as I like to do, I want to give particular shoutouts to patrons Rune Jacobs, Ryfin Bonaparte, City Yamako, Wago221, Kel Hoonboy, and Hector Montemayor for being especially awesome. You guys are great. And there we go. That is the end of the review week of Awesome for 2020. I hope you enjoyed. I'm gonna go rest now. And by rest, I mean I'm gonna go and edit all these videos. You don't know how much work I've actually done while I'm sitting here in this chair. You're probably several days out from this exact moment of me. I look forward to when that moment exists and I can rest. But until then, ladies, gentlemen, and others, watch more anime. And stay frosty.